Congratulations, you have found the How the Heck Have You Been podcast, a show about catching up with old but not forgotten friends. My name is Mark, and every episode I call up someone I've lost touch with over the years and ask them how they are, what the heck they've been up to, and what life has taught them in the interim. Let's get to it. Okay, welcome to the finale of Season 1 of How the Heck Have You Been? This is Episode 11, and I won't be posting any until next summer. I'm going to kind of bank some episodes through the year so that I can release them weekly like I've been doing. But before I get into who my guest is today, Zuzanna Knypinski, I wanted to do a shameless plug for my little art side gig business, artbymarker.com. If you don't know, I do some kind of intricate ink drawings. It's kind of an unusual style that I've developed over the years, even starting in high school. My focus has been trying to do a little bit less expensive prints that you can buy and kind of switch out through the seasons. I got a lot of seasonal stuff on my page. A couple new listings, some trees, one spring, fall, winter, and summer. That's kind of cool. They switch out, but it's the same tree in the background. And then I also listed some new bird prints as well, if you're into birds, which a lot of people are. So if you want to throw some support my way and have been enjoying these episodes, it'd be great. Again, that's artbymarker.com. And then one more thing I'm also doing is that every year I do a different little Christmas drawing, 5x7, but I've started turning them into Christmas cards. So I actually have the New Year's design for 2022 Christmas cards ready. So if you're interested in pre-ordering that, you can save $5. So it'd just be like $20 for 20 cards, which is kind of hard to beat. That's much more expensive everywhere else. So go ahead and message me. You can message me through artbymarker.com, or you can, for friends on Facebook. Just throw me a message. I'll send you what the new cards look like. And if you're interested, we can get that going. So without further ado, my guest is Zuzanna Knypinski. Zuzanna was born in Poland, lived most of her childhood in Canada, and then moved to Texas for high school. We talked about her experience of scuba diving, getting the bends, getting into politics, doing triathlons, being a lawyer, her crazy Italian cousin, how babies are made, and peepaw, but not her peepaw. It was so great to catch up with her, and I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Oh, there she is. Let's see. Hey!
Hey, how are you?
Good, it's Zuzanna. Oh my gosh.
I know, I haven't seen you in forever.
Blast from the past. I think the last time we saw each other was in a movie theater, like in college. I think the Grapevine Mills. I think you happened to be in town for a summer or something, and we ran into each other at the same movie. Do you remember that?
Is that right? I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't even remember what movie it was. So anyway.
That's crazy. Can you hear me okay? I was very nervous about the technology.
Oh, yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah,
I'm always
like a
nervous.
boomer,
These things
I
are
turned my phone
nerve-wracking.
off entirely.
Wait, what'd you say?
Like a real boomer, I turned my phone off entirely so that it wouldn't go off.
Well, you never know when you might have set a random alarm for something.
I know, right?
In fact, now that you mention it, I'll turn mine off. I had mine on because our oldest is in a summer camp right now.
You literally haven't changed a bit.
Thank you.
I guess we shouldn't talk about our video since it won't be on the podcast, but you haven't changed at all.
The hairline's a little thin. It's going back a little bit, but other than that, hopefully. You look the same too.
Good to see you.
Still got the glasses. Congratulations on the pregnancy as well.
Thanks.
We'll have to get into that
exciting.
later. So we have not seen each other. Now, you're in DC right now, right?
Yep. We actually just bought a house about 20 minutes outside of DC on the Virginia side.
That's awesome. How big is DC? I don't know, how many square miles is the actual place?
So it was supposed to be 10 miles by 10 miles, like a perfect diamond. And then Virginia bailed and took its contribution back out. So it's a little less than 10 by 10 miles.
When was that? When did they take that back? Way long ago? Yeah. Okay. I didn't know if that was recent
not a history major, Mark. Don't put me on the spot.
I just know every year they talk about it becoming a state or a different, they want to become a state, right? And be able to...
Well, yeah, it would make a big difference if it became a state because it's like 98% Democrat and liberal. And it's got a pretty decent amount of wealthy professionals, so it gets taxed really heavily, and yet its citizens have no vote in anything federal.
Seriously? You can't vote in presidential elections?
I mean, you can vote, but with the electoral system, there's no electoral vote assigned to DC.
Wait, I didn't realize that. It's just a popular vote for the numbers? Just for the statistics? Oh, wow. I did not realize that. That's crazy.
And they don't have senators, right? And so I mean, it would just be a consistently Democratic seat in the Senate if they got statehood.
Well, this is a good place to start because you have always been an influence just for me personally, like as someone who is politically aware, culturally, world. Because you were born in Poland, right, and then
That's right.
moved. You spent most of your childhood in Canada, is that right? Or
Yep. Yeah, I was born in Poland, and then when I was 2, my parents fled. We actually lived for a year in a refugee camp
oh wow, I
in
didn't know that.
Austria. And then I lived in Canada from like 2 till I was a sophomore, till about 15. And then I moved to Texas.
Okay, so what were they? Was there a civil war in Poland at the time, or what?
Just communism and the Iron
Okay,
Curtain and all that great stuff.
yeah, because that was still awful. Because what did the Berlin Wall came down to 86, right? Was that?
No, no, I was born in 86. The Berlin Wall came down in 91,
Oh, okay. I thought it was the year we were
89.
born. Yeah.
Couple years after I was
Okay.
born.
Okay.
So
Craziness.
mid 80s, there was still sort of every so often corridors would open, with European Western countries where they would say that they were taking in asylees, and that if you could get there, they would grant you asylum. And so
Now's
my
your
parents took
chance.
advantage of that.
Okay. So was your mom at that time? Because she's a doctor, right?
She's a scientist. She's not
Oh,
like an
science. Sorry. Yeah.
MD. Yeah, she has a PhD in neurology. But at the time, my parents were like 22 and college students.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so they both actually interrupted their degrees to move.
So maybe that. I mean, maybe just the consequences of your childhood and me having just been born in Texas and raised in Texas all my life in Dallas Fort Worth. I was having met you in high school, and I remember I think it was at my mom's house at one point. You had come over and we were talking with my brother-in-law at the time, and none of us were even aware of the European Union and like what was happening. Like, how do y'all not? I think you remember almost like admonishing us. So like, how do you guys not know about the EU and what's happening, and that they're about to conglomerate all of these countries into a
Yeah,
single union? You're like, I don't know. We're just living our living
it's
our best
become
life.
it's become extra interesting having married like a born and bred American, because sometimes we'll like talk about historical things or historical facts, and we realize that it wasn't taught to us the same way.
Right.
Like, my perspective on something is just different, and I'm like, wait, is that what they taught you in school? And he's like, yeah, this is the truth. And I'm like, I don't know what the actual truth is because I wasn't there under Genghis Khan, but that is not what I was
Yeah.
taught. So, but it's funny that you perceive me as being very politically inclined in high school, because I actually married someone who works in politics. So my husband does campaigns, and has pushed me way further than I've ever been. So we now have to watch CNN every day, and I have to vote in every single local election, no matter how local. And we canvass, in the fall, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So my
Well, that's
political
good.
involvement has like skyrocketed by marital loyalty.
Well, it's not a bad influence. I'm sure there are worse things spouses have convinced other spouses to get involved in.
Funny.
We
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was like jotting down things to potentially talk about on here, and one of the things I wrote down was the things that my husband has gotten me into that my high school friends would have never imagined me being into. So aside from politics, he's also talked me into training and running for triathlons, which, if you
nice.
remember how non-athletic I was in high school, is a funny shift for me.
Yeah, because I think even you doing color guard, I think I remember correctly that you were somewhat reticent to do it, and
Yeah,
that
I only wanted to do it because I wanted to hang out with you
with all the
guys.
band
Do you
people,
remember?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all my friends were friends from IB classes, and
Hmm.
such a huge part of IB was in band, and you guys were having just like such a great time, and it was such a tightly knit community. And I had absolutely zero musical skills, so there's no way I could play an instrument. It had to be color guard. Um,
And
so I got into it.
was that only your senior year you did that, or did you
Was
do color
only my
guard
senior
junior? Yeah,
year.
that's what I thought.
No, I just did it for a year. Yeah.
Okay, so you're running
Um,
triathlons. How many have you done, or are you just now training?
Now probably done like about half a dozen or so.
Oh wow. So okay,
Um,
remind me because I kind of want to do it. So it's biking, swimming, running, right?
Yeah, so you start with the swims first, then it's the bike, then it's the run.
But what are the distances?
So it depends. I mean, a full tri. So full disclosure, I haven't done a full triathlon. I do what
Okay.
they call half triathlons. where you swim about a mile and then you bike. It's not very standardized, but you bike somewhere between like 15 and 20 kilometers or miles. And then you run a 5K.
Oh, that's not bad. I could do that.
It's not too bad. It
Yeah.
takes like 2 to 2.5 hours, depending on how fit you are.
Yeah. The swimming
Really,
would
the
get
hardest, the swimming is what gets
Yeah,
people.
because
Yeah.
we just recently got memberships at the rec center over by us, and I was like, I'll swim some laps just because I've been doing a lot of running and weights, but I haven't done a lot of swimming, and I know it's good. It's low impact on joints and stuff. So like I'll swim, and I did 4 laps, and it's not even the Olympic; it's half Olympic, right? So I just did 4 like half laps. Like woo, that's hard work. I gotta get myself acclimated to this.
It's funny when you observe the people in the races, mostly it's runners who knew how to ride a bicycle and then taught themselves to swim.
Yeah,
And so for me, it was the opposite. I was a swimmer as a kid, and like everyone can ride a bicycle. I've just never been a runner. And
yeah.
so I start strong, and then I'm just like dying on the run, and everyone is just
Hmm.
like passing me by. It's a little disheartening at the end, but
It
it's a lot
takes
of
a
fun.
while. It takes a while. I remember because my sister got me convinced to do a half marathon. She's done a couple
Uh-huh.
full, and once you finally hit the 5 mile mark, I mean, it took a couple weeks. I was like, I don't think I can do this. Like at the
Yeah.
3 miles, I'm like, I don't know. And then finally, you hit the peak, and then you can do it a lot. But
Yeah.
it is hard. It's hard to get into.
It's it's a cool challenge though. I've enjoyed training for it.
I like biking. I feel like I could bike just indefinitely. I drove from my house. I don't know if you know exactly where. So it's like, what's the closest? Kind of over by, the restaurant you used to work at.
I used
That
to work at a
Chinese
restaurant.
place
Oh
near
my God,
the
that was
Mongolian
ages
Grill.
ago. Yeah,
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 we
yeah,
live kind of
yeah.
close to that. So I biked from there up the Cotton Belt Trail all the way to Grapevine Main Street. So that was like
Oh
20.
yeah.
That was like a marathon of biking, like 26 miles round trip. And by the end, I was like, I could still go. Like I could. Biking is nice because
They have these things called centuries, which is 100-mile bike ride that I've been eyeing. They do them for like, various causes and whatnot around here.
that'd be fun.
Um,
Yeah, Sally's
yeah.
parents did one called Hotter Than Hell, and I think it's up in Mineral Wells, maybe. I forget where it is, but it's dead of heat summer in Texas, and they bike. I'm like, I don't
I
know.
was gonna say,
Yeah,
you get extra points for doing any of these races in Texas in 100-degree weather.
it's really bad right now. Specifically, it's like 103 to 105 highs, and has been like that for a week, and it's going to be like that for another 10 days at least.
That's rough. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about living in Virginia is having like 5 very distinct seasons. It kind of gives you a rhythm to life and things to look forward to.
Is the fall weather really nice there too, in terms
The
of the
fall is
foliage?
amazing. The fall is my favorite. The
Yeah,
foliage is really nice and it gets really crisp. And then we actually do get some snow.
yeah.
Um, and then it gets cold enough, just cold enough to make you excited for spring and summer.
Yeah, 'cause we have some friends that he works for the FAA, and so he just moved up to Virginia and works in DC, and we're gonna go visit them in Maine. Kind of fly up there next
Oh,
summer, so I'm
cool.
excited about that because I really
Yeah,
haven't
Maine's
been out of
beautiful.
the South for a long time. We went to Colorado, but other than that, mostly South, and maybe we took a Napa trip
Yeah, we've
before
done
the
a couple
kids.
trips to Maine. Maine is really beautiful, especially in the summer.
All right, so what else has Spencer gotten you doing?
Oh,
Triathlons,
gotten me
politics.
into triathlons, gotten me into politics. He's really pushed my travel towards the more adventurous side. So, I've always been a big traveler, but I've been more into like the cathedrals and the museums. Now it's more in like the skiing and scuba diving
Oh
and
wow,
hiking category of things. So we did like a 5-day, 4-night hike to Machu Picchu, which was pretty
oh that's
cool.
cool.
So that was pretty intense. And then we both got scuba certified. We actually endeavored to get scuba certified in February in Virginia, and we both failed our first day because we both got frostbite and couldn't do
Oh
any of the
jeez.
assignments.
Oh
It was
no.
pretty bad.
Well, we had a
Um,
friend, this is forever ago, but she got a wetsuit, and she was swimming in our pool in Texas. But it gets cold in Texas for those who aren't from here, which I think most people who listen to this probably are from here because they're all of our
I was
friends
gonna say,
went to
Mark,
school
you've
here.
got some
But
ambitions for your
when this
podcast.
thing explodes and it's listened around the globe, Texas gets really cold. In fact, last year we had a terrible ice storm, and it was like sub-zero temperatures for a week.
I remember that.
But they were swimming in our pool with a wetsuit. It was, it keeps them warm if you have. But we all just in. How'd you get frostbite? Like, was it?
So, I mean, we were wearing like multiple wetsuits, but the only place that they would allow us to do it was like an abandoned quarry, like, where they would like, like
Yeah.
mine
Yeah.
stuff. And it was just frigid. I mean, it was just frigid. You had to
Ooh.
go down 25 meters because that's like the standard at which you have to pass the test. And they wanted us to like, mimic saving each other and like take our masks off and put them back on. And we were like, nope, abandoning this.
Jump
So we
ship.
both surfaced and had to try on a warmer day. But we did eventually get certified and have since then opted to do trips to warmer places. So mostly the Caribbean.
That's fun. I
Yeah,
could do
it's really,
snorkeling. I don't know about scuba.
there's something really meditative about it. Because all you hear is sort of the sound of your own breath, and it's really beautiful, and it forces you for like 45 minutes to just be with your own thoughts, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's kind of cool.
All right. Well, you've convinced me to
Yeah, you
at
should
least
try
be
it.
interested in it.
There you go. It's really not that hard to get certified. It's like a
Yeah.
couple days.
What do they make you blow your mask out? Empty your mask out underwater, I guess. I remember doing that.
Yeah, and then you have to like save somebody, like share air, and then learn how to surface and whatever. I will say take it very seriously because I actually formally got the bends
Oh,
when I went
wow.
to Belize and like had to sit in a decompression chamber
Oh,
for
geez.
8 hours. So
So
mostly I
what
think,
did that feel like? Because I don't know. I know what it's caused by, but I don't know, like, what are the
yeah,
symptoms?
it was crazy. I think that's the most important part about training is that, most scuba diving sites are on like fairly like remote islands, and some of the best parts about diving in the Caribbean is that there's no rules. And also, that's the scariest part is that there's no rules.
Uh-huh.
And so we were essentially diving with, not a great shop, and the water was really choppy, and we probably shouldn't have gone out. And, I must have not surfaced correctly, but essentially we wrapped up and we went to lunch, and I was just belligerent. Like, I was like essentially acting like an angry drunk.
Huh.
And my husband was like, "What's gone into you? Like, you're like picking fights with everybody and you're just mad." And I was like, "Yeah, and my chest hurts." And, thankfully he paid attention to the training and was like, "This is the sign of the bends." And so and it was crazy. I mean, we were like on a tiny island. We had to like James Bond speedboat to like another island where the
Yeah.
decompression chamber was. And then I was so belligerent because it like gets to your head that I was convinced that we were being bamboozled because it costs like 5 grand to
Yeah.
go into the chamber. And so my husband was like, "You're going into this chamber, like this is life threatening." And I was like, "I'm the attorney. I know when we do and don't get bamboozled."
But you
I'm
may
like,
not be in your right mind. All of the air in your cells has been exploded from coming up too
so
fast.
he finally talked me into it. And basically, you go into this chamber and they mimic sending you back underwater.
Yeah.
And they keep you there until your body's actually able to filter the nitrogen out of you.
I didn't realize that it could. I didn't realize it could be that delayed that you would notice. I assumed it was like you come up and are instantly in pain or something, but
No, yeah, you basically you feel like a drunk person and you start acting like a drunk person. The really scary part is that if you don't go into the decompression chamber, like little bubbles of nitrogen will stay in your body
yeah.
and you could be fine, or they could like dislodge in your brain 10 years later, and have like very serious side
Wow.
effects. So
So would that be similar? Not that you might know, but similar to a stroke, I guess.
yeah,
If it
yeah,
just
yeah,
blocks the
yeah.
blood flow. Ooh, that's scary.
So all that to say, I
Take
think
it
scuba
seriously.
diving is a great hobby.
You should all try it.
But it legitimately is dangerous, so the training is important.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned going to places that don't have a lot of rules. Do you remember Michael Shilley? He taught at LD Bell.
Oh yeah.
He taught
What did he teach?
GT
Government?
English. He taught English, but he left the year before. He left our sophomore year.
Okay.
So he taught our sophomore year, and then he wasn't there for a junior. But he's my godfather, and he took me on a trip to Guatemala when I graduated college because he was like,
Oh,
I
that's cool.
want because I took some Spanish, and he's fluent in Spanish and German. So like we'll go and work on your immerse you to build your Spanish skills a little bit, and he likes going to third world countries just to get the experience. He taught in Colombia for years as well, but he's back here now. Actually lives across the street from my dad. But he took me to Guatemala, and we hiked up to an active volcano. And we were like, I may have mentioned this story before, but we were like walking on lava, like cooled lava with like lava flows 6 feet away from us. It was like crazy.
And there's like no barriers,
Yeah.
no rules.
this would never happen in America. We probably shouldn't be doing this. And they even said a year or two before, three tourists died because the lava flow broke off and went a different direction, and they were trapped, and they, it was too hot and they couldn't get out. They couldn't get a helicopter in time.
You really have to be vigilant when you travel to places that are a little developing and a little off the beaten path.
They'll take your American dollars. They won't be as careful about it.
When I was in college, I actually went on a study abroad program called Semester at Sea. I actually went with Sarah Smith. And it was this like really cool program that at the time was being done through the University of Pittsburgh, but now it's at the University of Virginia, where they take like 500 college students, they put them on like a cruise boat that's been converted into like a floating university, and for a semester you go around the world and you port in like 10 or 12 different countries. So while the ship is at sea, you go to class. When you're in port, you're like free to do whatever you want in the country, and you're usually in the country for like 3 to 7 days. And the track we sailed, we went down like the eastern coast of Latin America, and then across to South Africa, and then up South Africa and through Asia. And it was an amazing experience. I like immensely recommend this program. But I just look back and I'm like, wow, I was 19, and my parents let me go to like all these crazy countries by myself. It taught me a ton, but we definitely almost got mugged in certain places and almost got lost in certain places. It's a lot. Kind of like you were saying about Guatemala, you have to be careful.
Well, it's funny too, because I was talking with Mike about that. I was like, you like living there? I was like, yeah, I was mugged 3 times. It's like once he was mugged at Screwdriver Point, right? It was like, Philip said screwdriver, but that can do some serious damage. So
it sure can.
They'll rip the watches right off your wrist. He was like, you can't sit with your hand outside of the car window, or people will come by and just swipe your watch right off of it if you have a watch.
Totally. Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, of all the places I went, the only place we almost got mugged was Puerto Rico. So,
there's a data point. Yep.
Yeah,
but it happens here too. Parenting, as I've got an 8 and 5-year-old, and Sally is really good about being very protective. And I guess me as the husband, I'm like, oh, they're fine. They're not going to get abducted. But then you hear these stories. It's like, how worried should I be? Because we just had, I don't know how long ago, not long ago, a 14-year-old was abducted from a Mavericks game in Dallas.
Oh, my gosh.
And the dad was able to find her, but, she was being, it was basically sex slavery.
Whoa.
And took her to Oklahoma, right? She was in Oklahoma, and he was able to actually find her and help the police get her back. But
That's
crazy.
So intense.
It's like, oh, just hearing that story is like, maybe I should be a little more worried.
Just things you don't even think about. I'm 5 months pregnant, so I'm at the point where I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I should start putting, a registry together. And obviously one of the things we need is like, a baby monitor to like watch the baby while it's sleeping. And I had a friend send me this like massive spreadsheet with all of her recommendations. And she was like, you need a baby monitor that's not on Wi-Fi.
Yep.
And I was like, why? And she was like, oh, so the Chinese don't like hack into your baby monitor and watch your baby sleeping. And I was literally like, that thought has never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
And you just don't know where that line is between being overly vigilant and just protective of the kids.
And it's so hard not to want to. This is the age-old question of liberty versus freedom versus safety, right? It's like, I almost just want to get my daughters chipped, like you just want to chip on them. Like that seems so Orwellian, but I'm like, man, if they ever get abducted, it sure would be nice to just GPS pinpoint them. But
and then
like that's creepy.
You think about our childhood and just how much time kids in the 90s spent alone.
Oh yeah.
Walking themselves to and from school,
and even worse, a generation ago, before that. Yeah, for sure. And then I'm I was a boy, and for whatever that's worth, my parents, I'm sure, weren't as worried about me. But having daughters, I'm like, well, my parents never did this, but I was like, well, I was also not a girl, so I don't know.
Yeah, but boys, they're so adventurous, they get hurt.
Oh yeah.
It's funny. I have such a bad memory that I was really nervous about doing this podcast because I'm like, oh my gosh, Mark is going to ask me about all this stuff that I don't remember. But one vivid memory that I have is, do you remember how color guard camp started a week before marching band camp?
Yeah,
I don't know if you remember this. And it was at the time when my cousin Tommaso from Italy was in town.
Yes.
And so I was so bummed that I had to go to color guard camp that I had asked you to quasi entertain him. And that was the time when we had spent like all of our summers at the pool at your dad's house.
Yes,
And
yes.
so you had a pool party, and I went to color guard camp. And sure enough, like 45 minutes later, you call me and you're like, "So I smacked your cousin in the face with a pool noodle, and now he's got a nosebleed."
I do not remember that. Oh, I must
And I
have
was
felt so
like,
bad.
"Oh, boys, I never had brothers, but I'm assuming that's what it's like."
Yeah, yeah, pretty much, pretty much. Because I've got three nephews, and they're all the time just getting injured. They're down in Arlington, but we spend a lot of time with them, so it's funny to see the difference.
How are you enjoying being a girl dad?
Oh, it's great. I mean, it's funny because we went to Disney with my sister who has the three sons, and we bought like a game, and I was like, this villain from Frozen. She's like, Mark, I've never seen Frozen. I have three boys. I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm
That's
up on
funny.
all of the girl franchises. I can sing the Frozen songs, and I forget that it's not necessarily normal either.
Well, we actually got pregnant off of IVF, and there's a lot of downsides to IVF, but one, potential silver lining is that you can pick the gender of the embryo
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
implant. And it was like a huge conversation that my husband and I had to have, do we have a preference? And if we do, are we sort of willing to implement that preference? And we decided not to. We decided they actually rank the embryos by like genetic strength for you.
that's
And
good.
so we
Yeah,
decided to go that route, but we have mostly girls, so um, we'll probably have a clan of girls down the road.
nice. Oh, so they keep them for later as well. I forget that
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can,
they
yeah,
they
preserve
freeze
them.
them for you. Yeah.
So I was just talking with Sally about that because I wondered how that affected the evolutionary pressures. If they like, is it one? We're going to get into some adult conversation here. Is it one sperm cell to one egg cell?
Yeah, yeah. In
Okay.
terms of what
So how
what
do they
what they're
select
freezing.
the sperm cells?
So basically, what they do is in a regular menstrual cycle, you ovulate one egg, right? Like that's what
Yeah.
naturally happens. And so when you're going through IVF, they essentially pump you full of hormones for about 3 weeks and get your ovaries to mature as many eggs as possible. So instead of
Okay.
maturing one egg, you mature anywhere from like 12 to 25. And then they surgically go in and they remove those eggs from your ovary. And they basically put them in a petri dish and then they sprinkle them with like a sperm sample.
Okay. So
Um,
it's there still is multiple cells trying to get at it
yeah, yeah,
at one.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Um,
That makes me
Although,
feel better
when
about that process a little bit. Because it's like it'd
yeah,
be
when we
weird
were
if you were like selecting one single sperm cell to inject into the egg. Like that's like skipping a lot of evolutionary stuff there if you're not going to let them fight for the whatever.
so apparently, if your sperm's kind of on the slow side and can't figure it out, they will actually take a single sperm in the petri dish and put it in the egg.
Well, yeah, because the footage you always see is them injecting a needle into the egg cell, and so I'm like, wait,
Yeah,
is that how they're doing it all the
it's
time?
called like assisted insemination.
Yeah.
And what's actually fascinating, which we learned, is when you're in high school biology and they teach you about this, you're like picturing like thousands of sperms, right? Like
Right.
fighting their way to get to this egg, and like the one fastest one is going to get there and create life. Do you know what percentage of sperm has one head and one tail, meaning it's
Oh
like
no.
properly formed
Oh, I don't want to
and
know
doesn't
this.
swim in a circle? Like you just have to have a head and a tail and swim in a straight line.
Oh, what percent? Oh, I'm gonna guess really low just because based on the way you're asking, I'm assuming it's super low. Five. 5%.
Three,
Oh,
three.
okay. That's crazy.
So
I
it's
didn't realize that.
three, yeah. So the male contribution to reproduction is 3% of their sperm has to not be idiotic sperm that swims in a circle.
Why would we produce that much unviable? That's
I have
crazy.
no idea. So if 4% of your sperm is like, properly formed and swims in a straight line, you
That's a
have
good
you
number.
have like super sperm that you
A
should be
plus.
donating to sperm banks.
Wow, that's weird.
Yeah, not
It's
crazy.
crazy how much you don't really know about, especially biology. Biology is so complex, and we just think it's so simple.
Yeah, it's wild having gone through infertility to get pregnant. You sort of realize how it's like such a simple yet such an immensely complex process
Yeah, and in
at the
fact, I
same
was going to
time.
bring that up with you and having struggle because somebody close to me also had struggles with infertility, and I don't think they ever did IVF. I think they just did the shots, the fertility shots, and something else. But like we grow up in our generation and probably, generation before, Gen X and stuff like that, just assuming, oh yeah, because of all the medical technologies we have, we're not really that scared of, I mean, maybe after COVID we are now, but we're not scared of getting sick. We just kind of assume you get pregnant and have babies.
Yeah.
And then nature hits you over the head. You're like, oh no, this, there's a lot of complex problems that will insert themselves in your life.
Yeah, it's really crazy. Especially, I don't know, it's really interesting. I feel like I'm part of that generation of women where we got told, don't worry about dating, don't worry about kids, focus on your education,
Yep.
focus on your career, right? There was this really big push towards sort of being a girl boss and going to grad school and like, oh, you'll just have kids later.
When you're
And
48,
and there's a lot of writing going on by women in my generation and my age that kind of feel bamboozled, right? Who are like, who you marry is extremely important, and to a lot of women, having a family is like their top life priority. And yet we taught this whole generation of women to just like focus on school and focus on work and not worry about it. And then you wake up at 35, single or not, or married, and you start trying to have kids, and you're like, holy crap, I've got issues, that might totally put a spin on my ability to have
hmm
kids and to have the family that I wanted. And so that was just one of my takeaways that I've been sort of telling people is like, there's yes, your career and your education are important, but your family is also important, and it shouldn't just entirely be put on the back burner.
Yeah. Yeah, or at least make yourself aware of the different timelines you could choose to take and decide, but I don't
Yeah.
think even now I don't think that conversation is really being had with millennials about that.
Well, and it's just crazy to kind of, how insurance plays into all of this. Like, if I've taken one thing away, it's just like the importance of really educating yourself about these processes
hmm
and advocating for yourself. So, for example, there's this kind of mantra out there that people, the general public kind of knows, which is like infertility is when you try for a year and you don't get pregnant, right? And so the doctors are like, well, have you been trying for a year? If you haven't been trying for a year, go home, keep trying, come back in a year. And what's crazy is that if you do get pregnant and you miscarry, that year resets at the date of the
No.
miscarriage. Yeah. So if you tried for 10 months, you got pregnant, you
Jeez.
miscarried, you then have to try for another 12 months after that miscarriage. And so finally I asked, I was like, what's up with this year? Like, what's this magical thing that happens at the year? And they said, well, then you qualify as being formally infertile and your health insurance kicks in. Okay. So me being like the lawyer, this is what I do for a living. My next question was like, all right, well, what's my insurance coverage for infertility? And they go, oh, well, you don't have any. Your insurance plan doesn't actually cover infertility. And I was like, so why are my husband and I banging our heads at the wall for 12 months for you to just tell me at the 12-month mark that I'm
Gonna have to pay for it
infertile
anyway.
but have no coverage? Right. And I was like, okay, so can I just pick up the phone and call an infertility clinic right now? And they were like, oh, yeah, they'll
Of
take
course.
your money if you want to give it to them, which is
That's
just crazy.
wild.
It
That's
was
wild.
insane. Um, and I think in this process, like there's a certain intuition. I think when something's wrong, and you just have to, like I said, advocate for yourself to make
Well, and
that
that's a
happen.
lot. That's a lot of time when you're talking about in biological years of when the best time to have children
Oh,
is. Not
absolutely.
as a I'm uncomfortable even like saying some of these things. So just be aware. I'm probably ignorant of a lot. So don't cancel
No.
me. Don't cancel me, guys. But that's a lot of time. If you try for 10 months and then you miscarry, then you reset another year. That's like 2 years that now you're 2 more years down the road and haven't started a family yet.
Crazy. The other
Yeah.
thing we learned, and when you sent me those questions kind of prepping me for this
hmm
podcast, I was like, oh, this is something that I kind of want to share with the world. Is like, we learn from movies and TV shows that if you have infertility, you have to go through IVF, and IVF is really expensive. But there's like 4 or 5 steps before IVF that the vast majority of people with infertility issues actually get pregnant on. And like the very first thing is a pill that costs $6 out of pocket. And so I think there's a lot of people who struggle with this and are paralyzed by like the cost of IVF, not realizing that there's a lot of options prior to IVF that resolve most people's problems. If you just, reach out to a doctor.
There you go, people. It's good to know. It's good to
Worth
know.
knowing.
Seriously, yeah. Good stuff. So how far along are you now? Not that far, right? You're still first
I'm
trimester, I think?
at 18 weeks, so about
Okay.
halfway through the second trimester.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
so pretty exciting. I had a pretty rough first trimester. I don't know if Sally had a lot of morning sickness, but it hit me real hard. So I'm very excited to be eating anything other than bananas and rice for a change.
Yeah, I forget exactly how she was, but I know she didn't throw up a lot with morning sickness, but she did get it. Um, yeah, and that's the other thing with, being around somebody who's pregnant. It's like, oh, we really are animals. Like we really are like organic
Yeah,
living things. We treat ourselves as these intellectual, highly conscious, beings, but when there's this moving thing inside, you can feel like it's feet coming
totally.
out of your stomach. Like, oh, this is crazy.
I can't believe how energy draining it is. Like
I
no
bet.
amount of I have to get work done or I wish I could exercise. Like the baby's like, don't care, sucking all your energy.
Yep.
Please nap.
I'm the most important thing now.
Yeah,
I trump everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
But we're really excited. I don't know if you felt this way, but I keep asking my husband, I'm like, what's it like to be, with a pregnant person? He was like, it's really lonely. All you do is sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, I feel like a bachelor again.
Yeah, and then you also don't it's hard to know like how much credit to take or how much, it's like
Right.
cuz obviously we're doing, 0.005%
Well, you're
of
contributing
anything.
3%
Yeah, there you
of
go. Yeah.
viable sperm.
So it's like, it's exciting, but at the same time I'm like how involved am I or what should I be doing right now? Especially when the baby comes too. It's like if you are breastfeeding, as the husband, I'm like, well, I kind of want to get sleep. If you have to be awake anyway, it's better for me to sleep and be able to take care of her during the day. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
so he's like, I don't know. That's awesome.
That's cool. How old are your kids now?
8 and 5. So
That's a fun
our
age.
youngest Margot's about to start kindergarten next year,
Yeah,
so that'll be nice.
very cool.
These are definitely the golden years. Infants are fun, but it's not really until they're like 9 months old until 2. That's like the really fun baby time. And then at 2 they become monsters, and 2 and 3 they're monsters, and then they got fun again.
What I've heard. Yeah, I'm looking forward to them being little humans with a mind and a curiosity of their own, and actually being able to see them, have hobbies and interests and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot.
Yep, and a little
Have you
yeah.
found that your kids have developed any interests or hobbies that you're like, I know nothing about this?
Yeah, well, Samantha really likes to sing. She seems really interested in like vocal singing, which neither
Uh-huh.
Sally nor I mean, I can carry a tune, but no, there's not it doesn't run in our families at all. So that was surprising. And
Yeah, that's
Margot's
cool.
much more rough and tumble. Like I feel like she might even be athletic, and neither of us really are that athletic, Sally or I.
Yeah.
So yeah, you never know.
Um,
You never know with
it's
those.
still so crazy to me that you married Sally because I really knew Sally in high
Yeah, you
school.
mentioned that because I mentioned in the Davis podcast that he was the only one that really knew us, and you messaged. You're like, "Hey, I knew both of you too." So
Well,
you had
we
French
had
together
French
and Stuco,
together.
right?
Yeah, and then we were in student council together. So and like I think we hung out sometimes outside of school. I think like in the context of French club or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But I remember when I saw you guys got married on Facebook, I was like, whoa, two
What?
worlds coming together.
Didn't see that. Didn't see that one.
Well, that's
Yeah, so
pretty cool.
we worked that one magical summer at Olive Garden by the Northeast Mall together. And we didn't, I mean, we kind of went out a couple times with just a big group of friends, but she had a boyfriend at the time. And then we connected later on Facebook, really. Because she was
That's
also
cool.
friends with Claire and with you, like on Facebook. And she went to TCU, so Toby and bunch of, Matt Schofield and Toby and
Yeah.
I'm skipping a big, oh, Claire went to TCU as well. So I was like, oh, I remember Sally. And then we,
It was surprising to me, and so I listened to like your first couple
mm-hmm.
episodes, which I think this is so what you're doing is so much fun. But I always thought that like because I left Texas to go to grad school and then moved to the East Coast, that like I was the only one who was like no longer hanging out with our circle of friends. So when I heard that like you hadn't seen Matt Schofield in like 2 decades,
Oh
I was
no,
like,
yeah, yeah.
how surprising.
I mean, Toby and I have kept up a friendship, so like we hang
Yeah,
out regularly. He's also really good friends with my sister because her husband worked at Apple with him. So like
oh, that's cool.
he's actually more he actually spends more time with them now than he does with me. And so but that's really him. And then Laura and Lauren and I reconnected about 10 years ago with our writing group, But other than that, yeah, it's really, I mean, just college, blows all those relationships up, and you never
Yeah,
see, you see people again.
right, right, right.
So
But so it's a cool thing that you're doing, reconnecting us all, kind of, you
yeah,
know.
thanks. And the idea just came, I would message people on Facebook, for whatever reason. Maybe even you were involved in this because I think I put you in contact with Tina Dale, right, for as a realtor for
That's
your
right.
dad.
That's right. Yep.
And so, anytime that happens, you're like, oh, by the way, how have you been? It's like, hey, it's been
Yeah.
15 years. I need a realtor. And you feel obligated to be like, also, how are you? It's like, no, I'm going to actually call people up and ask them how they've been and actually get a real answer for an hour. So, yeah,
I feel like
it's been
social
great.
media gives you this like false sense of knowing what's been happening with people. Like I was thinking ahead of, us chatting today and I was like, "Oh, I know what's up with Mark. Like, he got married, he has two kids." And then I was like, whose names I don't know or ages I don't know, Because
Yeah.
if you don't put it on social media, you just don't know.
And then you hear, I
Um,
mentioned this the previous episode, but you hear people are having struggles or something like, oh yeah, they got divorced. I'm like, oh, they look so happy on Facebook. Like, of course, like you have no idea what's happening because we're all just putting
yeah.
these, the best of the best on Facebook, and then we all assume everybody's fine.
Well, and recently too, I feel like there's been a really big push to get off social media.
Oh yeah,
I know you chatted with someone about that. It's just it's so just become so performative and so toxic that I feel like a lot of people are just getting off Facebook and off Instagram, and then you really lose track of what they're
yeah.
doing. It was I was thinking, but you had asked other people that you interviewed sort of where they went to college and why and whatnot, and I was giving a lot of thought to that. And while I thought LD Bell was a really good school and I thought the band program was really good, I one place where I thought we were lacking was sort of in the counseling department.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I went to Texas Tech because that's where my high school boyfriend went. Um, and listen to this. I went to Texas Tech wanting to major in international relations, and they didn't have an international relations major. And no one thought to flag that for me.
Yeah,
Or,
I think I met with my actual counselor maybe once, and he kind of reviewed my paper and was like, "Oh, okay, this all looks good." Because I'm sure he was not worried about us because we were IB and all these AP classes. Like, oh, their parents will be fine. Their parents will take care of them because they've already gotten this far. But even still, it's like, no, we still maybe need some help, especially me being the third child. And there was a big gap between, so by that time, my parents were like, "Oh, you know the drill. Go to college, son." And they did help me, not to discount them, but at the same time, I was like, I could have used another data point for that.
it's something I've noticed just in, the last maybe 15 years or so, just like how important having mentors is,
Oh, for sure.
people outside of your parents who some sort of knowledge on you, either in your career or in education or something, just to guide you a little bit. Like I remember just not knowing who to turn to for a lot of stuff. And if your parents don't know, how college works or college credit or whatever, you don't really have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
And so it's, I had, you won't believe this, but my little sister Matilda, who was like 3 or 4 the
Mm-hmm.
last time we saw each other, she's 20,
Yep.
which is
Yep.
crazy. But that's one thing I tell her is like, find mentors, find people you can pick up the phone and call and go to coffee with who can
And
just
it's
kind of
so
help you
hard
along.
because there's no formal process to getting and finding a mentor. Also,
No,
you're right.
there
It's like,
isn't.
how do you go about that? You just have like you said, you just got to keep an eye out for them. And
I think there's people out there who naturally like to mentor,
mm-hmm.
um, who maybe would have gone into a teaching profession or something, or just like connecting with younger folks. And I think if you can pick up on that and start building those relationships, they end up being just really valuable down the road.
And just have an open mind about everything, and go down some YouTube holes, researching college, and go down, that's also one way just to get a bunch of information quickly, because I feel like, I mean, I applied to one school and I went to that school. UNT was the only school I
No,
applied to.
totally. I mean, my college decision process was I had gotten a full ride from Texas Tech and OU, and then I didn't get money from UT, but I got into their Plan 2 program. And in my, what is that, 17-year-old mind, my thinking was, well, if I got money from Texas Tech and OU, then why pay for UT? So then it was down to Texas Tech and OU, and OU had crappier dorms. So I went to Texas Tech.
Okay, I've got it. I've got a better story than that, a worse story than that. So my decision process was Sarah's mom, my girlfriend at the time, junior year, said, "Oh, Texas Tech and UNT have good English programs." It's like, oh, okay. So those are the two schools I looked at. Like, I wasn't even like formally sitting down with her, like, okay, I really need some info. She just happened to mention it. I was like, okay.
Great.
And in my defense, we did visit Tech, and we didn't go together, did we? To Tech?
No.
I went out. I don't even remember. And I just remember it looking, I was like, I don't like this place just in general. Like, no offense to Tech, but it's just wide open. It's a bunch of dusty, big open areas, and the campus was kind of the same. And I went to visit UNT with Frank's Chris Frank. No, that's wrong. I forget. Somebody's older brother went to UNT, and we went together. I was like, oh, I like this campus a little bit better. So I did visit both campuses.
Andrew Frank's older brother.
Yes.
But
what was
it's
his,
funny.
was it? Maybe it was Chris Franks. Maybe it was. For some reason that sounds wrong, but I think it was Andrew Franks' older brother, Chris. Yeah.
Funny you mentioned that because I'm the oldest of four, and so I rarely had experiences of like older people,
Right.
bringing me to do something. And one of like the coolest memories I have from high school was when Andrew Franks' older brother and his girlfriend, which was really cool, invited me and Andrew to go see Jimmy Eat World.
Oh, nice.
In concert in downtown Dallas. And it was like my first experience with like having an older sibling, and they drove and they like got the tickets, and it was just so
that's really cool.
I remember at the time.
That was a big band at that time, because that song, I forget the name of the song. It just takes
the one that's
some
like,
time.
it just takes some time.
And I'm in love the rhyme. Yeah, that was it. That was, I think, our senior year, junior year, or something
huge.
that came out. Yeah, it's a great song still. That's fun.
So went down as a big memory for me that I then tried to kind of pass on to younger generations of driving my sisters and their friends' places.
So you must have 3 sisters then, right? Or do you just have 2?
Yep.
Okay.
No, I have 3 sisters.
Yeah, 2 that were a little closer to you, and then Matilda.
Yep, that's right.
That's a lot of girls. I forgot. Oh, and Toby and I worked for your dad. We should mention that. Bougainville.
That's right.
I think that was just like a summer, maybe a semester, painting houses. That was actually fun.
Paint the outside of a house?
Inside. We were painting the interior.
Okay.
And we finally got, I remember, it wasn't really like this, but it was like he promoted us to being able to paint the doors.
Oh, yeah. If you know how to trim. Yeah, it's a promotion for sure.
So I remember there was a lot of shenanigans that went on, because it would be, he would be like, yeah, y'all can paint whatever hour because nobody's living in the house yet. And so Toby and I would like go after, college classes at like 11 o'clock at night and be messing with each other in the house. I remember once I got there before him, and I stood at the top of the stairs, like with a tarp over like pretending to be a goat. I parked around the corner so he couldn't see my car. And he would be like, Mark, are you in here? Are you in here? I'd be like at the top of the stairs trying to freak him out. And then he was like, I'm going to tell Zuzanna's dad that you did that. And I remember he just laughed. Your dad was just like, that's hilarious.
My dad, the most easygoing human being on earth, who would like not care about any of that.
He's awesome. How is your dad doing, by the way?
He's doing really well. Yeah, I was actually going to say, so we bought a fairly big house on the outskirts of DC. And, when you buy a house, it needs projects. And so he's been coming in for a couple weeks at a time and been teaching us how to do some renovations.
Nice. So he's living up there now?
And stuff. No, he's in Texas. He's actually must be really close to you. He's like in Northerton Hills.
Oh, okay.
I actually bought him a house kind of like in the backyard of Richmond High School.
Oh yeah, that's really close. In fact, that's where Mike Shilley teaches right now. So,
is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Because I actually think about your old house, because we live right by. We go to that Sonic sometimes. That was right down the street on Odell, and I'm like, oh, there's Susanna's old house right down there.
Yeah, my parents got divorced in high school. When I was in college, my mom kept that house.
So is she still there?
She's still there.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. She got remarried, and then my dad lived like in an apartment for a little bit, and it kind of meant that we didn't have much of a home base. And so after I paid off my law school student loans, that's when I reached out to you for a realtor. I bought him a house in Northerton Hills. So it gave us kind of a really nice home base for the holidays and whatnot. So it was really great.
That's cool. All right, so let's talk about your career, because we're getting close to an hour mark, and we haven't even gotten into you being a lawyer. So you went to Tech for international. They didn't have the program. So then what about grad school?
Yeah, so I went to Tech for international relations, which they didn't have, but I convinced the provost to like create for me.
There
So
you go.
I basically like looked at the class catalog and just pulled together classes that like fit into international relations, and then they codified it the year after me. So it was essentially a mix of like political science classes and history classes and like a language
So it's now
requirement.
the Zuzanna Knypinski School of International.
I don't know what they called it, but I mean, they had the classes, they just didn't have the formal
Right.
major. But because I went in, I don't know about you, but I went in with a lot of credit because of IB.
Yep.
I went in with almost 2 years of credit, but still got a 4 year full ride. So I actually had a lot of kind of wiggle room.
Oh, that's
Um,
nice.
so I actually double majored. So I majored in international relations and Spanish. And I really wanted to become like
In
a
Spanish.
united. Yep, I took Spanish. Remember with Miss Thornburg
Oh
in
yeah, were we in
upper
the same
class?
class in that?
I
We
don't
we might have
remember.
been, but you were
Yeah,
French mostly, right?
so I did both. So French was
Oh,
my
okay,
IB
okay,
elective. You know how you guys did
yeah,
music? I just took a second foreign language.
yeah. Oh, okay,
Um,
okay, okay.
yeah, so then in college I majored in Spanish, minored in French, and then also did the international relations
So you
major.
must
I
have
just had like a
did you have to do both IB tests for French and
yeah,
Spanish? So you took them both,
hmm
yeah, for IB.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um, and so I just had a lot of wiggle room once I got to Texas Tech, and so I studied abroad twice, and I was able to like sort of pull together all these different degrees and stuff. And I wanted to be like an international lawyer. I wanted to work for the United Nations, or I wanted to work for like refugee camps or something like that. Um, so I graduated. We graduated like at the height of the recession in
Mm-hmm.
2008, and frankly, I didn't recognize it at the time, but I was just burned out. I mean, I had been going so hard in school for so long that I didn't have it in me to apply to law school at the end of my junior year, right? So I just kind of let it slide until graduation, because you have to apply to grad school like a year out. So I graduated and had like no plans, and the economy was just in the gutter, and so I actually waited tables for a year, um, at Texas Land and Cattle in
Oh,
Lubbock. So I
nice.
knew everything about state cuts,
Yeah.
um,
What you know what
and
I
it was
just
actually
heard? This is gonna be a complete side story, but what's it called when you want it like basically charred on the outside? I think it's a blue steak.
yeah,
You want it
and
like
cold on the
charred on the
inside.
outside and red on the inside. I'd never heard about that till recently. My friend Benjamin Schubert was like, because you can't do it unless you're at a really nice restaurant, or else they'll really won't do it correctly because they don't have a nice enough piece of meat to not risk you getting sick.
Yeah, yeah. I was
Yeah,
like, I don't recommend it at like
yeah,
chain restaurants.
right,
Yeah.
right.
But honestly, it gave me a lot of perspective into sort of the jobs that you might have if you don't focus on your education. I
Yep.
was working with a lot of sort of, no college degree kind of Lubbock locals, and they were very kind people, but it gave me some perspective into that world and what it's like to work for, maybe not the best managers making.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you remember you wait tables is like
Yep.
214 an hour,
Yeah.
right? And
See
which
also
is
the Conrad
outrageous.
Hartman episode where we talk about we both worked at that same Olive Garden different times, and the manager there was like, "Woo, yeah, not
Yeah,
not the greatest."
yeah. And so that really motivated me to go to law school. So I applied to law school after that year off, essentially. And I thought I wanted to end up in DC because that's where a lot of sort of the international diplomatic law kind of happens. And so I went to the University of Virginia, which is about 2.5 hours outside of DC. It's in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely beautiful if anybody needs a place to spend a weekend. But it was awesome. I mean, having grown up in Montreal and then moved to Dallas, I had never really like lived in a small town. So it was like 3 years in this like adorable little university town, near the Shenandoah Mountains in Virginia and like
Oh,
in wine country. So it was really nice. I have really fond memories of that. And then moved to DC and realized, most people don't get money for law school, and law school costs $75,000 a year, and it's 3 years. So I graduated with over $250,000 in student loans. And being a lawyer for the UN or any kind of legal aid or immigration work pays somewhere around 50,000 a year, which is not close enough to paying that off.
mm-hmm.
So I ended up taking a job at what's called Big Law, which is like just like a big law firm.
Wait, was
Um,
it literally called Big Law?
It's called big law. That's like the
That's awesome.
the lingo for it, the
Yeah.
term of art.
Yeah.
So I
But the
so the way
firm
they do
itself
it.
that you work for wasn't called Big Law, was it?
No.
Okay, okay.
It had
That's
a
what I thought you
particular
were saying.
name,
I
but
thought
sort
you
of
were
that
like,
that strata of like
yeah,
one
okay,
of the
got it,
30
got it. Okay.
largest law firms in
I
the
thought they were
world
just
are
being
called.
super on the nose with the name of their.
Yeah, I know. But the way they do it is they actually hire you for the summer, and so you work during the summer, and it's kind of like an internship. And then if they like you, they give you a permanent position after law school. And so I summered for a law firm in DC. I happened to get put on projects in what's called antitrust. So it's
Hmm.
like the law of competition. It's like, government regulating monopolies,
Yep.
that kind of thing. And I liked it fine enough. It's kind of an area of law that people don't know about. I think most people are aware of like litigators, which are the people that go to court, right?
Yeah.
And then corporate lawyers, which are the people that like draft contracts. But there's a whole sort of third category of lawyers called regulatory lawyers. And so those are the people who regulate anything, right? The environment, pipelines, cars, transportation, airlines, whatever. And so you can become a regulatory lawyer in some sort of area. So I'm a regulatory antitrust lawyer. Um,
Nice.
Not super fascinating. It's fine, but
Well, it comes
hey,
up a lot. At least some of the things I listened to. I forget what the big news story was a couple years ago when they were going to try to do trust law with maybe some of the big tech companies.
yeah, so it's very trendy right
Yeah.
now. Essentially because there's this sort of duality in the United States between capitalism and the free market,
Hmm.
right? And then regulating potentially monopolies. And the gist of antitrust law is that you look at other people who sell or make exactly what you make, and if you're trying to merge with someone like that, then the government might step in and not let you do that. So like if Coca-Cola wanted to merge with Pepsi, they'd be like, maybe not, right?
Yeah.
But what happens in the big tech companies is that you have essentially these like tech giants like Facebook and Google that are buying small startups that technically do something different, right? So like when Facebook bought Instagram, the government was like, no, we don't like it, but like technically those are two different
Yeah.
things, so we can't really block it. And so just very trendy in the news right now because the government's sort of starting to catch up on the idea of like, well, maybe we shouldn't let all these tech companies buy just like all these startups, because then you have the Googles of the world that are doing, not just search engines, but also like advertising and travel searches and, all the little tabs that you have on Google that allow you kind of to do a lot.
Yeah.
So very trendy right now. I personally am on a bit of a finding journey of trying to figure out what I kind of want to do next or whether or not I want to do this for a while. My goal was to pay off my loans and buy a house, and I just did that. And so
Yeah.
I'm a bit at a crossroads. I'm not sure I want to work for, quote, big law once I have kids because it's extremely demanding. So I don't know, kind of revisiting that original idea of why I went to law school. Maybe go back to immigration law or some sort of diplomatic law or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
So
just hearing the way you talk about it, it doesn't seem like you. It seems like you want to change for sure.
yeah, I think so. It gets a little repetitive after a while. It's the same arguments. I sort of work on the bad side. I don't work at the government trying to protect consumers from monopolies. I work for big firms and companies that are trying to merge.
Trying to get monopolies. Yeah.
Yeah. My one liner at bars in DC when people ask me what I do is that line from Star Wars where they're like, "These are not the drones you were looking for." Mine's like, "These are not the monopolies you are looking for." Like I just try to redirect the
Yeah.
government somewhere else.
Right.
So it's not
Nice.
exactly amazing for the soul. It doesn't make me feel like I'm doing a lot of good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unlike you teaching kids English, I feel like that had huge impact on a lot of positive impact on a lot of people.
Yeah, I have always had inferiority complex. I'm sure I've made a bigger difference than I feel I have, but sometimes
Oh, for sure.
yeah, it's been really great. Especially you mentioned school debt. Working at the early college high school I was until last year. Basically they're getting the 2-year associate's degree. As at the same time they earn their high school diploma. So when they're
Oh,
18 and
it's awesome.
graduate, they've got a associates from TCC, and then now they don't have to pay for those 2 years of entrance level classes, which is really cool.
Right. Right.
So as much dual or even if there's early, because there's a ton of early college high schools popping up now all over the place in most major school districts. So
Well, I mean, there has to be sort of a whole shift in changing how higher education is paid for.
well, in fact, I think I remember you saying this when we were in high school about how it used to be basically the bar was have you gotten your high school diploma and then you can be hired and then when we were in school it was now do you have your undergraduate degree? That was
Yeah, you
basically
had to have it, right?
unless you would just want a menial labor type job.
No,
Uh,
absolutely. It was really fascinating. When I was at Texas Tech, I was actually a student representative to like the board of Texas Tech, and it
mhm.
really gave me insights into how much universities are really just businesses.
Yep. Yep.
There is sort of a educational aspiration there, but it's also just a business, and part of the business is having to accept students that are not going to graduate. And that
Yeah.
goes back to counseling and mentoring. There's probably kids out there who shouldn't go to college, who
Hmm.
shouldn't take the $30,000-$40,000 out, because then they're saddled with that debt, and it'll follow them for decades.
Yep. Yep. But you can't say that or you sound like terrible. It was like to try to tell the
Yeah,
kid,
but
hey, maybe don't go to college. But you're right. I mean, there are people who it's like you don't really need a 4-year liberal arts degree to be a
totally.
great whatever mechanic, or
Or,
you know.
you go to, some of the community colleges are really amazing. Like the Virginia community colleges are awesome. If you go to a Virginia community college for 2 years and you like hit a certain GPA, then you automatically get accepted to a state school for
Yeah.
your junior and senior year. And then you're saving on the cost of school for 2 years, but there's kind of like you were saying, all these alternative programs they're not advertised very
Yeah.
well. And so I feel like kids don't hear about them
Yeah.
enough.
Keep an eye out for who has a financial incentive and just be aware of that. It's not always
Yeah.
a conspiracy, but there are some. I
Yeah.
recently, this is going to be like a weird story, but I recently got contacts and, I told my optometrist, like, I usually wear them for a little bit longer than I'm supposed to just to kind of, space them out. She's like, oh, well, you really shouldn't do that. And she showed me like my eye and how if you wear contacts for longer than you're supposed to, it can actually not provide as much oxygenation to your eye.
Oh, interesting. Uh-huh.
I'm like, and I was like, oh, that's really alarming. I should, but they also have a financial incentive for us to buy more contacts constantly. So I'm like, I don't know if I
Totally.
even believe that. Like, why would wearing it for longer make less oxygen get to your eye and not
Oh,
more? I
absolutely.
don't even know. So that's just my current conspiracy theory is that they're probably just telling me that because they have a deal with the contact companies, to sell
It's
dailies instead of monthlies or whatever.
it's just a takeaway I've had in my 20s and my 30s. Like you just have to watch out for yourself. You can't be thinking everything is a conspiracy theory, but you do want to sort of question what people say and do your own
Yep.
research and
Yep.
advocate for yourself. Um,
Yeah, well, and this may be a theme of this episode because you were talking about how like we grew up with really good institutions, I think, and I think some of the institutions around us are not so great anymore necessarily, and maybe
yeah,
that's part of it. It's like we were able to grow up and just trust a lot of what people told us,
yeah.
and now we're you get older and maybe it's just a normal process of life.
Now it's funny you say that. I feel like I have that debate a lot with sort of our parents' generation when it comes to food. They grew up at a time when their food just was healthy. So you just went to the
Yeah.
grocery store, you bought whatever, you didn't have to read the labels, and you just trusted that what you put in your body was fine. Nowadays, there's so much like GMO modified stuff and corn syrup and things that we are the generation that's sort of demanding things to be healthier and more organic. And I'm having just
Hmm.
a really hard time getting, my parents or Spencer's parents to sort of pay attention to that because they've spent their lifetimes not having to. And so it's the same thing, when you grew up trusting institutions that really did have your back, it's hard to then switch over to perhaps not trusting them as much.
There's a book called Salt, Sugar, Fat. It's really good. I think was it Michael Moore? I think is his name. I forget the author, but it goes into all the shenanigans the food industry
It's
uses to pump as
crazy.
much salt, sugar, fat because it's cheaper than fresh herbs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's wild. My husband and I did like a 30-day cleanse called the Whole 30, where you're basically just like not supposed to eat additive sugar is the short of it. I just couldn't believe where the sugar was.
Oh,
Like
it's
there's sugar in
everywhere.
bacon, there's sugar in like burger patties. There's just sugar
Yep.
everywhere. Um it's crazy. I actually learned recently that in from a legal perspective, in the United States, if you want to put something in food, you can, and it's on the consumer to essentially sue you and prove that it's unhealthy, which of course is like a huge, like Aaron Brockovich, like,
Yeah.
costly, whatever. Whereas in Europe, if you want to add an additive, it's on you as the manufacturer and the producer to prove that it's
Yeah.
healthy. And I'm like, oh, is that why when you go to France and you eat nothing but like baguette and cheese for a week, you come back like 10 pounds lighter and glowing?
There aren't just all of these ingredients you can't even pronounce from
Yeah.
the label.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about? We didn't talk much about high school, but I do remember Tommaso coming over, and I remember him. He was awesome. He was like, was he from Italy?
He's from Italy,
Italian, right? And like just stereotypical Italian, right? Like you put
Oh,
milk in
so
your pasta.
yeah.
I remember you telling me the story. I think about that every time I make Kraft mac and cheese. You told us that you were making it one day and you put milk into it, with the butter and the powder. He's like, you put milk in your pasta?
Yep.
Like, yes, we do. Welcome to Texas.
Yeah, no, the only thing about high school that I think it was worth mentioning is like, by the end of my high school, my parents were like on the verge of getting divorced. So my house just like was an awesome place to be. And I just remember your house and your dad just being such a safe haven for me. I don't know if you remember,
awesome.
but I would come over and literally just hang forever. Like you would do your drawings and I would do homework, and your dad didn't, it didn't bother him.
Oh yeah, he's the most laid back. Almost to a fault now because I'm helping him. You mentioned his pool. I'm helping him try to keep his pool up to running, and he's like, "Oh, Mark, it's fine. The filter leaks. It's supposed to leak until I'm like, I don't think it is, Dad. I think it's not supposed to ever leak, but okay." So
well,
he's
at
awesome.
the time when I kind of felt, ungrounded and perhaps unsupported by adults, your dad played like a really big role for me in opening his home and just being cool. Like he was just a good adult that we could talk to. And so that's, I don't have nearly as many memories of marching band and whatnot, but that's really what I took away from high school is just,
Nice.
it's just nice to kind of have adults stick up for you and be there for you when you need them.
Yeah, he will be so warmed that you said that. I'll have to tell him.
Oh, I hope he's doing well. Other than his pool, how's he doing?
He's still in the house. We're actually going to go over there tonight. We have a family friend in town from the West Coast. He's coming back from college, from his first year of college, so we're going to go do a cookout tonight. So he's doing
Definitely
great.
Say hi to him for me.
I will. And it's funny you say that because I was going to read. Let me go ahead and read what you wrote in my yearbook because it's actually kind of along the same lines.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Mark. Wow, what a year! And this was our junior year. So this is the end of our junior. All the crazy alphabetical things to do, IB, SAT, ACT, AP, and much, much more. And I am so happy you've been there all the way, making our little high school lives less serious and stressful with your humor and random comments. That's about right. I'd say I'm grateful for having met you, but that's not exactly it. I'm grateful for you having accepted me, introducing me to your friends, and just making me feel welcomed and valued at Bell. I'm sure you have your bad days, but it never shows. You always put a smile on my face, and I can't wait to have you there next year at 6 a.m., making me laugh after I've dropped my flag for the 5th time. Smiley face, Zuzanna Knypinski.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You were just there for me. Not hard. It wasn't easy changing high schools sophomore year.
Oh, well, so did you come to Bell at the beginning of sophomore year?
Yeah, I came to Bell at the beginning of sophomore year, and it was a rough transition. I mean, they put me in all regular classes.
Stupid.
Despite the fact that I had been in IB schools. Like I went to an IB middle school.
Again, you mentioned our counseling department, maybe not have been. Okay,
yeah. Right. And my dad's, and the reason they put me in regular classes is because I thought there'd be a language barrier because I was switching from a French education to an English education.
Oh,
and
okay.
my dad made the point of like, well, math is international. So she needs to be in honors math. And so I was in all regular classes, except I was in pre-P algebra. And I remember I am so grateful for this moment to this day. I was sitting at like a 4-person desk combination with Kayla Lorenz.
Yes.
Remember her? She was an IB with us. And I was telling her that I was in all these regular classes and that I didn't know anybody. And she just looked at me and she was like, you don't need to be in regular classes. And literally raised her hand and was like, Miss, whatever, we need to go to the counselor's office.
Like right now.
And she like encouraged me to go to the counselor's office, and I got moved to all the pre-IB, pre-AP classes on like her
That's
recommendation. And
awesome.
that's when I met all of you guys and kind of got plugged into your circle of friends.
That's funny because Kayla Lorenz went to my elementary school, so I've known her for a long time. But I think she went to Bedford and not Hearst.
Okay, got it.
But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
should maybe even call her up because we were never that close in high school either. But it'd be interesting to talk to her because
It's like
you know,
my only vivid memory of her. Like she just looked at me. She was like, "You don't need to be in regular
let's
classes."
get you out of the Oh, honey, that's awesome. Yeah,
um,
kudos to her.
yeah. And then that's when I met, you and Sarah and Toby and the whole sort of like IB band crew.
Do you remember? Were you? Because I feel like we may have been in the same history class that sophomore year or something, like pre-AP history or something. With I don't remember the
I,
first
I,
class we may have had together. It all gets vague.
I mean, I got switched. So I got switched like
Yeah,
halfway through a semester into pre-AP classes. So I might have gotten like moved into your class or
yeah,
something like that.
maybe.
I can't remember. My schedule was like all sorts of screwy because I also had to like catch up on, the geography and the speech that I didn't take as a freshman and all that stuff.
But how fluent were you in English? I mean, I never remember you ever having an issue with English.
So listen to this, Mark. So the books that we read pre-AP English as a junior at LG Bell
Mm-hmm.
were the books that I read in my foreign language English class in seventh grade.
Oh no, I can't. So I remember Madame Bovary. No, that was senior year. That would have been
So
just
like
Nichols, right? Did you have
Lord of the
Nichols?
Flies, I think we
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
read. Um, and what else did we read that year? Frankenstein, maybe?
I don't think I ever read Frank. Oh, that was no. We read Frankenstein ninth grade. But it's
I
getting
can't.
worse. It's like there's this big push not to do novel studies at all. There's a big push to do
Oh,
just
really?
independent reading, uh,
Huh.
which is great. But it's so hard to assess which kids are actually reading, and it's
Yeah.
like I guess the kids who don't read won't read by themselves anyway. But still, it
I
bothers me
think
that we don't do as many full class book
I
studies.
do kind of like being pushed to read things outside of your
Yeah,
your genre. When I
yeah,
actually moved to DC, I started a book club as like a way to just connect with
yeah.
people and build community. And so it's a 12-person book club with 12. It's all girls, it's all women. And for a while, for the first couple years, we actually picked books by consensus. So we would like, vote and whatnot. And we always ended up landing on kind of these like safe middle of the road picks.
Mm-hmm.
And then we changed and basically assigned a month to every person in the
Yeah, that
club.
makes sense.
And so every month someone gets to pick a book and that's just it. And so it forces you to kind of read beyond your comfort zone, right? So
Yeah.
somebody will pick like a sci-fi book or like a self-help book or sometimes we read like some pretty cool nonfiction. And I think it's kind of important, especially at a high school age, to kind of get exposed to
Mm-hmm.
stuff that maybe you wouldn't pick on your own. So that's kind
Yeah.
of a shame.
Yeah. That's cool. What's the most interesting thing you've read in that book group?
Okay, so this book has like changed my life. You have to read this book, Mark.
Okay.
It's called The Secret Life of Trees. Have you heard about
Oh,
it?
I've heard of it.
Okay, so it's a nonfiction book written by like a German botanist, originally in German. It's been translated. But it's essentially all about how like trees are obviously alive, we know that, but how they're like interconnected to each other and how they like communicate with each other through their roots and like that kind of thing.
Nice.
And how like older trees will like communicate that they're about to die to like make room for younger trees to grow. It is
Oh wow.
fascinating. It's fascinating. It has changed how I hike. Like I literally hike and I'm like, are you guys talking to each other?
Talk to me, trees. Well,
No, but it's
I think I mentioned Radiolab before. Radiolab is such a great podcast. If you haven't ever listened to any of them and you listen to podcasts, you really should. Especially just go back and listen to their whole, basically everything they have. But there's one about trees and how apparently you wouldn't get any plants above like 6 inches or a foot without the fungus that's in the ground that helps give them nutrients. And I think communication is part of that as well. And it's like, oh,
makes
that's
sense.
fascinating. Like you can't have trees without the fungus below them.
It's like fascinating. Like it was talking about how if you have like trees of a given species like growing on a large area and they begin to get attacked by a parasite,
Mm-hmm.
they'll like communicate to the
Yeah.
other trees further away to like develop like protective layers against
That's
that
insane.
parasite. It's
Yeah.
really cool. I mean, I think we think trees is like secondary to the animal kingdom, but apparently they're pretty
Yeah.
fascinating. So I recommend it. No, but it's been really cool. We read all sorts of like just really interesting stuff.
Meanwhile, I'm
Both
on my year and a half still of War and Peace. My
goodness.
Tolstoy. I mean, I've been doing it on and off, but I'm almost to page 1,000, so I'm getting close.
We try to undertake like a big, really long classic every summer. So one year we read Anna Karenina over the summer, and
I
that
want to.
was
Tolstoy's pretty good. Did you like it or no?
I did like it.
Yeah,
I did like it, but it took a while. Like I
Tolstoy's
was really
good.
into the parts about her and her love story and her character. When it would go on and on about like,
Hmm.
the working class in Russia, I'd be like, okay, we're gonna
Yeah,
skip
yeah.
some of
Skip, 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 skip.
this.
That's what's so great about Shakespeare. It's so concise. It's so profound and also short.
You mentioned that you liked Shakespeare on a earlier podcast. You'll
Mhm.
appreciate the fact that we've decided to name our daughter Ophelia.
Oh,
So we're
nice.
going the Shakespeare route a little bit.
Nice. I haven't read Hamlet in a while. I undertook to read 100 books in a year. I don't know if you remember that because I posted a lot on Facebook about it.
Did you succeed?
I did, but I had to cheat a little. I had to read a bunch of like novellas basically, and I,
Yeah.
I included Shakespeare plays in the count. Because for my birthday,
I
Sally bought me like 30 books that were on my wish list. I was
Oh,
like, oh
cool.
crap, I'm never gonna read these unless I buckle down and like challenge myself to read a bunch. So I did that. That was right when Margot was born. Because I remember reading what's Don Quixote, and that was a real. I loved that more than I thought I would. Don
Really?
Quixote is
Yeah.
really great, but
Really good ballet too.
it's really one of the first like meta books because Cervantes kind of, if I'm remembering correctly, makes himself a character in the book,
Yeah.
and so it's like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is actually quite modern for having been written so long ago in Shakespeare's time.
Yeah. I remember one of the sort of first meta books that I read that blew my mind was 100 Years of Solitude.
Oh, I love Marquez. That's
Yeah.
so great.
Which is really, as a Spanish major, I ended up having to take a lot of like Spanish literature.
Did you read it in
Um,
Spanish or English?
so I read it in English first, and then I read it in Spanish.
I wish I were fluent enough to read it in English, in Spanish rather.
Once you know what's going to happen, because you've
Yeah.
read it in English, it's like a little bit easier to read in a foreign language. But just the magical realism and just like you said, the meta-ness of it, I was
Oh yeah,
like,
because
wow, that's
we
crazy.
read Chronicles of a Death Foretold
In high
in
school.
high school. Yeah,
That's right. That was one of the IB like assignments.
yeah, and that was a
Yeah.
cool book too. And I remember, so this will be the last story before I'll respect your time and we'll close it out. But
It's all good.
in my Spanish speech, because we had to give like a conversation about a book we read in Spanish for the IB
That's right.
exam, and I remember I had included in there. He has and I'm about to cuss, so he has a story called "This Town of Shit," and so it's in Spanish. It's mierda or
Uh-huh.
mierda. My accent is terrible, but and so I included that in my little speech. And Miss Thornburg was like, "You should maybe cut it out just because it's profanity, and you don't really need to say that." I was like, "Okay, okay." But then I was also going to mention Chronicles of a Death Foretold, and death is muerta, which sounds very similar
Uh-huh.
to mierda. And so in my speech, I said Chronicles of a mierda like Chronicles of a bowel movement foretold. And so she was like laughing during my thing because I said on accident. She knew I was saying on accident, like Chronicles of a shit foretold. And she's like, and of course, I think only 25% of ours got selected to be graded by the actual IB people. And of course, mine was
Yeah, yeah,
selected.
yeah.
So she had to like write an explanation about, why he said that, why he would have said it, why I was laughing during his presentation. I was like, I'm sorry. I was trying
It's
to be
funny
intellectual.
you mentioned that because I actually have a vivid memory of like my little recorded thing with Miss Thornburg. For some reason, mine was about the Galapagos Islands. I don't know
Nice.
why I decided that, which, like, as you know, is part of Chile. And like one of the very first questions she asked me was, "Well, what language do they speak there?" And it just caught me really off guard, and I was like, "Oh, you speak Chileano there."
Chileano.
And she's like, "Chileano? Are you sure?" And I was
In
like,
serio, Chileano or no?
Chileano. And she literally like pauses the recording and she was like, "I'm not sending this in. This is embarrassing. Get your shit together."
That's awesome. Chileano. It is Spanish, right? Like,
Yeah, of course.
Every South American country except Brazil, right, is Portuguese. But that's my one like piece of South American knowledge. So that's funny.
Yeah,
Chileano.
Miss
We
Thornburg had
She
a
was
huge
great. She was
impact on
really
me. She was
awesome.
great.
I learned so much Spanish in that class. I learned like 400% more Spanish in her class than any of my other classes.
Yeah.
Because she
Yeah.
actually taught it like immersive, and she actually spoke nothing but Spanish in the class for the
She was
most
an
part.
amazing teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tried looking her up to like tell her how impactful she was on me, but I couldn't find her.
Well, I wanted to do a teacher episodes of these too. I ran into Mr. Pollard at the gym. He just happens to use my gym the other day. I was like,
Crazy.
hey, you should come on the show at some point.
It'd be
But
cool to hear where people are.
oh, the one other thing, I don't remember anything about you mentioned on the Facebook comments that I got the highest score, one of the higher scores on the essays. Like, do you remember
Okay, I
what we
can't
did
believe
wrong?
you don't remember this. So
No.
essentially, they assigned this like essay to us, right?
Wait, say that again.
And they assigned this like IB essay to us
Yeah.
that was worth anywhere from like 0 to 3 points. And the actual bit in the instruction that was like missed is that it was supposed to be creative in a certain way. So it wasn't supposed to just be like a summary
okay.
of history. It was supposed to be like your take on what would have happened in history if something were different or whatever. And so the only person that actually had a creative spin on things was you. Because didn't you write about A Tale of Two Cities?
I wrote about Tale of Two Cities and Great Expectations, and I was like, oh, you hear about different kinds of heroes. I'm going to write about how these Sidney Carden and Pip were the realistic hero. Like, because they were realism, Dixon was known for his realism and portraying things as they actually were. So maybe because I kind of came up with my own
Yeah, so you
category.
had like injected like your own views
Yeah.
and criticisms and commentary into it. And so I remember you got a 2, most people got a 0, a couple of us got a 1. And I just remember being like, of course Mark got a 2. Like his creative little artistic mind.
Well, yeah. Because my memory is like me being the dumbest out of the smart kids, right? Like I was just lucky to
true.
be. Again, inferiority complex, but I think I've already said this, but I remember being at graduation, looking up on the stage. I was like, oh, I know all 10 of the top 10. I'm like good friends with all of those people. That's weird.
That's some of the best advice I've gotten from a mentor. You should always be the weakest link of the people you surround yourself by.
That's really good advice. All right.
You did well.
Okay, so
are you going to quiz me on something?
I am, but first I have to preface this with the story. Do you remember you went to some like craft fair or something, and you got me a little wood thing that says "I love peepaw"?
Oh.
Do you remember this? Okay, so
this is inappropriate. This is going to become inappropriate.
No, it won't. It won't. I consider that, but no. So the joke is peepaw, and like especially the South, I guess, is like a grandfather nickname for Mima and peepaw. But in Polish, is it Polish? It means like so I don't know. Is it a slang term? Is it more of a clinical term?
Slang term for female genitalia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you saw this is I love peepaw, so you decided to buy it for me because we had to joke about it beforehand or something about how peepaw is a really inappropriate term in Polish. So your quiz today is about genealogy.
Okay.
I think I did consider like I should do it about, but no. But before I do that, I have the prepared statement as always. So Zuzanna, because of your maturity and worldliness, I am sincerely grateful and better for having known you. You are just one of the hundreds of kind, generous, and benevolent people I know in a world where we need every single one we can get. Please keep being awesome and doing awesome things. Okay?
Sounds good. You do the same.
I'll try. I'm trying, man. All right. So here's your 5 questions about genealogy. You have 7 seconds to answer. Some of these the first 2 are kind of, well, we'll see. I think they're easy, but especially if you're in politics.
Don't set me up for embarrassment.
All right. Number 1. How often are U.S. federal censuses taken?
Every 10 years.
Okay, you didn't even do the multiple choice.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize there were multiple choice.
Number 2. People born between 1946 and 64 are considered the baby boomers. But what is the name of the generation just before them? So people, their parents basically, 1928 to 45. Are they A, Generation X, B, the lost generation, C, the greatest generation, or D, the silent generation?
I'm going to go with the greatest generation.
Incorrect. It was the silent generation. So they were so it was silent generation. Before them was the greatest generation. That'd be World War I people. And before that, the lost generation. So I don't know why they're called the lost generation. Maybe just because they're so old. All right. Number 3. What is the most popular nickname for grandfather in Texas as of 2019? Is it A, Pawpaw, B, Peepaw, C, Gramps, or D, Grandfather Dearest?
I'm gonna go with Papa.
Correct. A, Papa. Good. 4, what does once removed mean when referring to a cousin? A, you are separated by one generation. B, you are cousins through law. C, it is the cousin of your cousin. Or D, it is the cousin of a grandparent.
I think it's none of the above, but okay, wait, give it to me again. I thought your cousin once removed was the, like, your parents' cousin's kid.
Your parents' cousin's kids. No.
Your parent had a cousin, and then, they both had children. That was a cousin once removed.
Your parents.
But that can't be right, because that's not one of the options.
That's not.
All right, so read them to me again.
All right, so A, you are separated by one generation. B, you are cousins through law. C, it is the cousin of your cousin. Or D, it is the cousin of a grandparent.
I'm going to go with A.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So your cousin's kids.
Okay.
Or your cousins once removed.
Okay.
I believe. I always have to look it up. All right. But that is the definition I found through Google. Number 5.
All right.
By definition, you and your second cousin will share. You and your second cousin will share what family member? A, grandparent. B, a great-grandparent. C, an uncle or aunt. Or D, a sibling.
I'm going to go with grandparent.
Incorrect. That would be
Great-grandparent?
cousins. Your cousin.
What?
So great-grandparent is second cousins.
Okay. All right.
So I think the cousin
in my defense, I have no extended family in the United
Well, there you go.
States,
All right.
So
nobody has gotten 100%. I don't think Steve Pratt did. No, he didn't. Do you remember?
I couldn't believe how much he remembered about Marching Band.
Well, I think he wrote all of those rules.
I was like, please, I hope he does. I thought you were going to quiz me on Color Guard, and I was like, I don't even remember the instructor's name.
Oh, I should have. I should have got Brian Dutton to write you a question because he does that now, like as a coordinator.
Is that right?
That's really cool. His episode will come out next Wednesday. And Robert
I'm
Williams.
very fascinated at people who have careers in like the creative arts.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool.
It always fascinates me that it's a thing that exists. Like, I'm trying to sell my work. I'm like, I don't think this should have value. Like, I'm just drawing. I don't know why it has value, but people like it, so I'm going to keep doing it.
I just think we get siloed a little bit at a young age, either being, logical thinkers or creative thinkers or whatever. I'm finding in my 30s that I really like carving out time for like artistic hobbies, even though I'm not good at them. They're just good for me to do something different.
Yeah. What kind of stuff do you do? Paint?
So
pottery?
now, I when I miscarried, I got off social media, like completely. I just went black on social media, and I thought about going back, and I realized that the part that I missed about it was like the scrapbooking element of it, like the kind of memory creating. So now I scrapbook.
Nice. Both my sisters are like huge scrapbookers.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Very cool.
They go to conventions.
Yeah, so I'm scrapbooking all the years that I've either dated or been married to my husband. So it's been kind of fun.
I thought you were saying you went back and scrapbooked all the people you dated. I was like, well, that's weird.
No, don't want to.
Here's my first ex-boyfriend.
It's a lot of fun. So I'll sit there and be like, what's the first movie we saw? And then we'll have to like go down memory lane to like try to figure it out.
It is nice to have that because my wife, when we were first dating, I spent a lot of time with my sisters, and so they scrapbooked, so she kind of picked it up. So it's kind of nice to go back like, oh yeah, this was our first date, and this was our
Yeah.
Good times.
So I do it digitally, and then I print them.
That's probably easier.
And so then we can sit down and kind of go through it, and I annotate them and whatnot.
Do you ever go back and look at your like whatever messages, like because Facebook you can go way back and like look at the messages you sent way back? So, it's kind of scary.
Well, mostly I just realized I would use it as a point of reference. So we would be like, oh, when was the first triathlon we did? And then I would like scroll for the picture.
Yeah.
And it's date stamped. And I was like, I don't need to share my life on social media just to then be able to find like the data
for yourself.
But I've never done messages. I will say that I cringe when it like shows me posts that I made from like 7, 8, 10 years ago. I'm just like, dear God. Like sometimes I literally delete it. I'm like, I might run for office one day.
Exactly. I don't know if you could delete it enough. Yeah, that's scary. Oh, I was going to say too, So when Trump was elected, that was also a big like, oh, I should pay attention to politics because the world I live in is not the world I thought I lived in. Because nobody thought it was going to, like, even most Republicans, I think, didn't think he was going to be elected. But then, the Muslims, the so-called Muslim ban came down, and I basically used your posts as my opinion about it because you said it affected your sister, right? Like because of it, she wouldn't be able to travel or something.
What I posted about it. I remember it was outrageous. I like leaned in and did a bunch of pro bono work with it because it was just, I mean, it was so wide sweeping. I remember the night. It's funny you mentioned the night, Trump getting elected, because I actually had like my dearest mentor from Texas Tech in town that night. She was this like awesome woman at Texas Tech. She was a political science teacher. She was also a lawyer. She had a pixie cut. She was like the one like liberal person I could like really relate to at Texas Tech. And she happened to be in DC the day that, of the election as the results were coming in. And so we went out to dinner and we just got wasted in celebration of the first
of Hillary
president,
Oh, yeah.
And so I fell asleep because I had had so much wine that I fell asleep on this like high note.
Oh,
of, like,
no.
feminism. And then I woke up the next day like in a dystopic novel being like, what happened?
With a hangover and Trump's president.
Oh man. Yeah. No, but it's really true. I mean, you ask all the people you interview if they want to like, do a plug for anything. I mean, my plug would be like, people should vote. You should really vote. It's crazy what small percentage of the population gets to kind of decide how our country is run because people don't vote. And I think if every single person voted, we would be living in a very different world.
Yep.
So I'm very, very curious to see how Beto does in Texas. We're watching that race very, very closely.
Yeah. I see a lot of stickers and signs for Beto.
Yeah. So, but you got to get out and vote. Can't just be stickers and signs.
Alrighty. Well, on that political note, I will let you go. I appreciate your time. This may be just as long as Katie Paris's, so this is good.
Are you going to trim it back?
Well, I'll trim that one thing that I said that I won't mention again because I've trimmed it already. Wait, if you're hearing this.
Good. Well,
but
it was
anyway,
a lot of fun, Mark. I enjoyed myself very much. I hope you keep doing it.
All right. Thanks for doing it. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that was the show. Thanks for listening, everyone. Today's episode was recorded by Mark Dye. Our editor is Mark Dye, and he is also the executive producer. The intro and outro music was composed by Mark Dye in high school. It's really just me doing this. To support the How the Heck Have You Been podcast, visit artbymarker.com and buy some cool art. Thanks, y'all.